Today we've got tons of questions on Japan, its mythology, its monarchy, the Meiji Restoration, and the history of the church in Japan. Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with the prelapsarian, Charles Coulombe.
Prelapsarian? So I've somehow escaped the ruin of the fall of man. I'm dwelling in the garden in all innocence. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, yes.
Okay, well, I talk about facts not in evidence. Okay, great. I guess I feel a lot better. It's wonderful living here in the Garden of Trumau. Well, prelapsarian, that's a mouthful. I like that. Prelapsarian. All right, fine. Although you're testing my powers, given that the liturgical year is crawling toward its end.
How am I testing your powers?
Well, because the necessity for redemption is, and the coming incarnation. To say nothing of the Last Judgment, as made plain in the Gospel of the last of this Sunday. It all, unless of course you went to the Novus Ordo, in which case it was the Feast of Christ the King. But in any case, it's still kind of eschatological. None of that would make sense if I were prelapsarian. At least it wouldn't apply to me. All y'all would be having your troubles, but I'd be here in my little prelapsarian bubble, my little remnant of paradise from before time, just sort of hanging out and enjoying the divine presence and just sort of talking with the flowers and conversing with the animals, and sort of like Dr. Doolittle. I probably, if I were truly prelapsarian, I probably wouldn't be clothed, but I'd also probably be much more heroically built. So you win some, you lose some.
What is your favorite, if you could travel anywhere to see sort of a natural wonder, like in nature, where would you go?
Say a natural wonder. Well, the Hollywood Bowl.
What? No joke. No jokes for this one.
All right, fine, be that way. The place I really am keen on seeing, and I don't know if I'll get to see it, but it's called the Bialowice Forest, and it's on the border of Poland and Belarus. It is the last refuge of the European bison in the wild, and it is a remnant of the forest that covered most of Europe when Rome extended to the Rhine and Danube.
Wow.
And I would love to see that. I'd love to see the European bison roaming in the woods, the deer and all the other creatures they have in that forest.
Awesome. Cool. I've never heard of that, but that makes sense. All right.
Now, if you would ask me what American wonder would I like to see that I haven't seen, because I've seen a lot of the American wonders. I've been to the Adirondacks, the Catskills, the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, the Ramapo Mountains of the New Jersey-New York border, the Berkshires, the Litchfield Hills.
Okay, I don't trust you anymore. You're doing this build-up, and it's going to end in frustration for me. Okay, just...
No, it's not. I've been to Yosemite. I've been to Yellowstone.
Okay.
I've been to the Okefenokee. I've been to the Everglades. I've been to the Great Dismal Swamp. I've been to the Salton Sea. I've never been to Death Valley, believe it or not.
What about the Grand Canyon?
Yes, I've been to the Grand Canyon, definitely. And I've been to the Canyon de Chelly and the Painted Desert, the Petrified Forest, uh,
What about
the
Yellowstone?
Great. Yeah, I said Yellowstone. I've been to Yellowstone. Old Faithful, I've seen. I've been to the Grand Tetons. I've been to a lot of them, a lot of the national parks. It's one of the greatest things we have. So, as you can imagine, I'm keen on seeing some of the natural wonders here in Europe, and Mialovica is definitely one of them.
Hmm. I've always wanted to go to Alaska and sort of live off the grid there. I think Alaska's a cool. They say that's the last frontier, don't they, or something like that?
Well,
Um,
they do, but actually, I always thought that was more the Inland Empire.
Inland Empire of Southern California.
Yeah, yeah.
No, not so much.
No, Hemet, Fontana, Corona.
No, that's just meth country.
Meth country. It's where the Inland Emperor lives in his imperial double wide. Rialto.
Oh, okay. San
You know
Bernardino. Ugh.
you know the big pickup line in San Bernardino bars.
What?
Say, nice tooth.
Uh, nice tooth.
Well, you know that's what meth does. It concentrates in the teeth, and meth users usually have bad teeth.
Hmm.
So it's not just inbreeding in San Bernardino; it's also meth use.
Okay.
Well, what? You know, it doesn't have to be either or. You can have both.
So, what's new for you, Charles? Anything going on? Just getting off the meth topic.
Gosh, I think you just don't want to talk about you just don't want to talk about San Bernardino.
That too.
All right, fine, be that way. To answer your question, I was in Prague this weekend. Next weekend, I'm going to Budapest, so I'm seeing a little bit more of the monarchy before I come home in mid-December. You know that Peacock Donuts is going to be is definitely going to be. That's right. You haven't had your three glazed donuts for a while.
Well, I haven't. Dude, I actually just had peacock donuts today. So
Did you?
you're a glazed donut aficionado, and you don't diverge from that path. I appreciate all donuts. Not just glazed
Oh,
donuts. Okay.
did you ever consider a career in law enforcement? Just curious.
No.
Oh, gee. Well, fine. All right. No, but to answer your question, the what's going on? Well, St. Andrew's Day is coming up, of course, next week. The great Scottish feast, and it is the last week of the liturgical year, which we've got the first Sunday in Advent coming up on December 1st. And that will mean, of course, the beginning of all sorts of festivities. The Misas de Gallo, Sigbang Gabi, as the Filipinos call them, the Rorate masses here in Central Europe, which are masses, Advent masses, early in the morning, very late at night, by candlelight. They're very beautiful. Uh, and there'll be Advent markets here, all over Central Europe for the next until Christmas. Really, they'll have the Advent markets, also called Christmas markets, which are really extraordinary. They'll have all these little huts in any public square, and they'll be selling glühwein and Christmas goodies, decorations and things like that. It's a big deal here. And chestnuts. The roast chestnuts are going to start coming out now. Yes, indeed. Oh, I love the roast chestnuts.
I'm going to tell you something that's a little scandalous, and it's a little embarrassing for me in terms of you say chestnuts makes me think of Christmas-oriented food. I, my family just never did eggnog, and I only discovered eggnog maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. Can you believe that? Can you
No,
believe that? That's unbelievable to
no.
me. It was shocking. I know everyone in the audience like, oh my gosh, Franchini's so sheltered. Um,
I'll say, what were they keeping from you? Well, why?
I don't know. My family just didn't partake, and none of the Christmas parties that I've ever gone to, it's more alcohol focused. So
Well, you can have alcoholic eggnog too, you know.
I don't care for that too much, to be honest. I've actually already tried it. Eggnog is just a beautiful thing, just on its own.
Oh, it is.
With
I
ice cream
can
too.
take it both ways.
Yeah, yeah.
I can take eggnog both ways. And Tom and Jerry's, of course, we've discussed those before. They're very
I
much a Christmas drink.
I've been trying to get that, and the bartender is like, "Yeah, I could make that for you if I had like an hour."
All right. You know what we're going to do? Just for the purpose of nothing in particular. We are going to look up Tom and Jerry's Los Angeles and see if anybody makes them.
Is that that's the drink that they said Christmas was made for the drink, right? That's the quote you said.
That was David Runyon's thing.
Yeah, 1920s or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom and Jerry Los Angeles. Let me see. Tom and Jerry drink. Los Angeles. Where to find a Tom and Jerry cocktail? Reddit. Food Los Angeles.
Is this the same drink?
Yeah. The problem is, they no, Reddit can't tell you. They've got all kinds of the last T&J. This isn't from 1996. Well, let's see. Oh, man, this is sad. The Tom and Jerry drinker belongs to another generation, says Norman Book Officer, head barman at the Ritz-Carlton, New York. Last time I made one was 1982. God. T&Js remained popular with those over 50. Mind you, this is 1996, so it's almost 30 years ago. And Midwesterners. In Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Upper Michigan, they're easy to find at neighborhood bars anytime after Thanksgiving. Yeah, they would have sets. I remember those. In fact, I had one. I don't know of any place in LA that makes Tom and Jerry's. The last one I had in California was at the King Cole Bar. I mean, the Pied Piper Bar of the Palace Hotel in San Francisco.
I mean, would bartenders even know of it anymore? I mean, I'm surprised my bartender. I asked him because he was so hardcore. He happened to know it, but it sounds like the bartenders just aren't going to have the eggs. They're just not going to have the eggs for it.
That is the problem. The Tom and Jerry's could use that to prohibition. The trick is to make it.
I think it's gone the way of Product 19, Charles.
I hate that. I really hate that. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Hold on. The we hold on. Hold on. We might be able to do it. Yeah. Now this is 2021. But hold on. This may do it. This may do it. This may do it. Please, please, please. I'm looking at the Academy Museum. No, 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 no. Stop teasing me. Where? I'm looking at this list of them. Find and edit. We'll go for find. All right, Tom. All right. Downtown's Redbird says it has in 2021. Redbird, LA. Holiday cocktail collection. Ah! Victory is ours. Are you ready?
Ready.
The Redbird. Redbird. Okay. Now, where is it at? Oh, you know where it is? My gosh, it's in the old cathedral. Can you imagine? It's in the old. It's in St. Vibiana's Cathedral.
Of all places. This means something, Charles.
Of all places. Former cathedral turned event venue. Holiday cocktails, Redbird. All right. Well, this place, Redbird, it's a bar in 114 East 2nd Street. All right. They have Tom and Jerry's. Well, guess what? Guess what we're going to do when I get home, pal? We are going to go to the cathedral and get ourselves a couple of Tom and Jerry's. You can thank Cardinal Mahoney for that.
What a sentence. We're going to go to the cathedral.
You know, St. Vibiana's is where I got the Adulatory Day and the Pius XII Awards. And La Cardinala herself sold it and turned it into this event venue. So now it's Redbird, and now that's where you've got to go to get Tom and Jerry's in LA. So you heard it here first, gang. You know what? I'm going to take the bloody subway down there. I'm going to take the metro and have like 7 of them. Because, well, you know, who knows when we'll be able to have them again, you know? Might as well stock up. Toss them back, get on the metro.
That sounds like a good idea. All right, let's do. Well, first, shameless plug for the Patreon. Become a member. Join us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. If you, a lot of people are asking questions through YouTube comments. The way to get questions asked on the show is become a patron, and we'll ask them on the show. Also, get access to the pre-show. Usually, it's about 30 to 40 minutes extra content every single week, and that's about it. So, thank you everyone for all your support. We couldn't do this without you.
That's for sure.
All right, let's do questions. All these questions on Japan. All you aficionados of Japanese history, this is your episode. All right.
No wonder why I speak your language, right, man? I study English at UCLA.
Okay.
Keep your head down, Vinny. The place is crawling with Japs.
All right. Will do. All right. First question. You got me nervous, Charles. I'm nervous to get through this episode
What?
suddenly. Okay.
Those are two of my favorite old movie lines about the Japanese. One is whenever the captured GIs are brought in front of the sadistic Japanese officer, he says, "You wonder why I speak your language, right, ma'am? I study English at UCLA." And then, inevitably, before they're captured, or maybe after they escape, keep your head down, Vinny. The place is crawling with Japs.
All right, Nate.
You weren't brought up on World War II movies, were you?
I guess I wasn't. All right. Nate says, "Hello, Charles and Vinny. I have a question on a very serious and intense historical situation. Probably one of the worst crimes against humanity I've ever heard about. I'm referring to the infamous Nanking Massacre, also known as the Rape of Nanking. I've also been interested in military history and of all the evils committed during World War II. This seems to be the worst I've looked into. My question is, why was the Japanese Empire and its military so xenophobic towards their fellow Asians? And what was the ideology behind all this? Was it a Japanese version of Nazism or something else?"
There was something else. I mean, sorry. It was something else, of course. The Japanese, uh, over the course of the 19th century, had become very xenophobic, uh, but they've always had a love hate relationship with China. The relationship between China and Japan is a little bit like that between Britain and France, in the sense that France is certainly the cultural superior of Britain, and a uh, a great deal of British culture comes from the French. But uh, many times Britain has been politically and militarily superior to France, who defeated them. Well, a lot of that enmity between the two is somewhat lessened by Christianity. But there was none of that really in the Japanese makeup in those days. They had developed over the course of the Meiji Restoration. They'd gone through a couple of different reboots of the national ideology. And at that point, the most recent had re-emphasized the whole notion of the Japanese as descendants of the sun god, everyone else, especially the other East Asians, being inferior, except that there was the haunting knowledge that the Chinese culturally still had it over them. Uh, the rape of Nanking was utterly horrific. Uh, and the only thing I can tell you is that the Japanese did not have the same standards that Europeans did by any stretch. I mean, one of the reasons why they were so terrible to their prisoners and why they would uh, kill themselves rather than be taken prisoner was that they considered being taken prisoner to be an act of treason. And so, as far as they were concerned, any prisoners they took were traitors to their own country, and thus to be abused as they liked. Again, they believe the honorable thing to do is to kill yourself instead. Uh, it's just a very different culture and a very different outlook, and not a very pleasant one. I mean, part of it goes back, of course, to the law of karma, which has had the practical effect of cheapening human life in the Far East, and not just amongst the Japanese. Uh, the Chinese civil wars were horrific, including into the 20th century. I mean, the fighting in Indochina, we were fighting the VC. They thought nothing of murdering whole villages. It's stomach turning. But this is heathen humanity, literally. When you remove Christianity from the picture, what you're left with is something really awful.
Yeah. When I was looking at World War II stats, one of the most surprising, at least to me, a non-history person, is that in total deaths, Soviet Union's number one, just under 24 million, but number two is actually China, a little under 20 million. That's surprising, right? I mean, in a certain sense, because we don't talk or think about China a lot in World War II.
No, it was a huge deal, and don't forget that China was actually fighting the Japanese before anyone else. Initially in 1931, when the Japanese invaded Manchuria, and then again the Sino-Japanese War began in 1936, and by the time World War II broke out in 1939, the Chinese and Japanese had been fighting for 3 years. By the time we got into the war, it had been going on for 5 years. And during that time, the Japanese had successfully conquered most of the major cities in China. But it didn't do them much good, which is why by the time we began to pressure them in 1941, they were actually willing to get out of China.
What was going wrong?
Well, the Chinese guerrilla warfare, I mean, the Japanese controlled the major cities and the highways between, but they were losing tons of troops to Chinese guerrillas, both the nationalists and the Japanese. It was just too big a country for the Japs to conquer. And see, Japan had traditionally a problem. The problem was that the home islands were always liable to famine, and they needed oil and they needed scrap iron to continue to do anything. Well, as a result, they had 3 schools of expansionism grow up. The northern school said, let's go to Siberia. Well, they tried that in the 1920s and it didn't work out very well. So that was the end of the northern school. The western school said, let's move into China, starting with Manchuria. And in the end, that didn't work out very well. The southern school said, let's move into Southeast Asia. And in the end, that was starting in 1941. That's what they did. They invaded in 1941 after they attacked Pearl Harbor. They invaded the Philippines, Thailand, French Indochina, Burma, the Dutch East Indies, Malaya, all to secure oil and scrap iron and so forth. And even that didn't work out very well for them. It is interesting to me, though, that the nationalists, the Chinese nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek, who fought them, they at the same time had to worry about fighting the communists under Mao Zedong, with whom they had been fighting a civil war when the Japanese invaded. And so they made kind of a peace, but they both knew that as soon as it was over, they'd be back at each other's throats. So it was a very, very difficult thing. Chiang Kai-shek was a remarkable man in a lot of ways, and being able to keep the fight against the Japanese going while bearing in mind you have to deal with the Russians and the Chinese communists after the war. It couldn't have been easy being Chiang Kai-shek in those days.
All right. Would Charles please? Zenix has a bunch of questions on Japan. He simply says, "Would Charles please reveal all he's been hiding about the history and present situation of Japan? Now, what are you hiding
Oh,
about about
I
Japan?"
studied English at UCLA.
All right. So Zenix says he is going to outline some points of interest, and he encourages Charles to truly tell all, like with the papal incarceration he had to suffer, etc. All right.
That was in Bucharest. We're not supposed to talk about that.
All right. So the first thing he'd like you to talk about is the mythology around the monarchy and its origin.
Well, basically, the first emperor of Japan, Jimmu Tenno, was supposed to be the descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu. Oddly enough, that's a motif that appears over and over and over again in many mythologies. The idea of the monarch being the son of the sun. Uh, you find it with the Incan emperors. I mean, it's a worldwide human motif. Uh, the Chinese emperor was considered the son of heaven. Uh, but the difference, of course, is that where Chinese dynasties came and went, the Japanese have only had one, Yamato. And so uh, when the Yamato dynasty came into power in Japan, I don't know. There are different dates offered. I couldn't tell you which is the real one. I wasn't there. But from early on, they asserted their descendants from the sun goddess. Also, the way the Roman emperors in heathen days also claimed to be gods.
Ballpark? Nobody knows when it started in terms of what century?
Not really. I mean, the offer will go to Wikipedia, source of all truth. But you know, Jimmu Tenno. Tenno, by the way, it means son of heaven, and it is the official title of the Japanese emperor. So his ascension is traditionally dated as 660 BC. In Japanese mythology, he was a descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu through her grandson Ninigi, as well as a descendant of the storm god. He launched a military expedition from Hyuga near the Seto Inland Sea, captured Yamato, which was part of Japan, and established this as a center of power. And in modern Japan, Emperor Jimmu's legendary ascension is marked as National Foundation Day on February 11th. So there you go. 660 BC.
Looking at Wikipedia, so yeah, the Japanese monarchy is the oldest continuous hereditary monarchy in the world. But it's interesting. It says the imperial dynasty does not have a name, therefore its direct members do not have a family name. What was it that name you used? Yamato.
Yamato. Yep.
What is that traced
That's
to?
the area that they first conquered, and it came to be a name for Japan as a whole.
Oh, okay.
Japan itself, Japan is the Chinese rendering of Nihon, which is the Japanese word for Japan. It means the land of the rising sun. Tenoheka Banzai, Tenoheka Banzai, Tenoheka Banzai, which means may the emperor live 10,000 years.
How is it that the Japanese monarchy was able to have it so continuous compared to everyone else?
Well, partly geography, because the islands were fairly defensible. They're very mountainous. They're difficult to conquer, although people have tried. So that was one reason. A second reason is that it was extremely adaptable, because although the monarchy has lasted all that time, and during some periods the emperor had really ruled. At other periods, most recently the shogunate, and then of course the current system, he was only a figurehead, but it went back and forth. And there were times when the imperial family split in two, and they had civil wars in Japan. But inevitably, even if it was a strife, well, you've got your branch of the imperial family, I've got mine, and whoever won, it was still a branch of the same imperial family that kept the throne.
Okay. So now Xenix wanted you to talk about the monarchy's ceremonialization, both in the past with the shogun and the present. The former seems strange to me, as in the West it took a lot of liberal politicking to reduce a sovereign to tea rituals, while the latter is expected because of Uncle Sam's victory.
Well, the former, as I say, it went back and forth over time. There were different periods when you had shoguns. The Tokugawa shogunate was the most recent, but I think the Fujiwara and various other families at different times dominated. And there was at one point you had the shogun, you had the emperor, you had a shogun who nominally was the real ruler, but then the shogun had a region called the Shingen, and he was the real ruler. So you had this strange setup for a while where the emperor reigns, but it's really the shogun, except that he reigns, and it's really the Shingen. So you had a region of a regent, and all the while the emperors continued. But the emperor also, and this is probably played a part in the survival of the monarchy, was also the high priest, the chief priest of the national cult, the national cultus, the Shinto. Now, so was the Chinese emperor, so and it didn't do him a lot of good, but it was a different dynamic, both for geography and a lot of other reasons. At any rate, the so as I say, at different times you had shoguns and other titles sort of usurp the role of the emperor, and then eventually get knocked down again, and the emperor would reassert his authority, or another family would take over.
Yeah, I'm reading. Who was the third? Who was the second regent? Was it the Shiken?
The Shingen, yeah.
Shingen. It's saying the puppetization of the shogun by the Tokuso. And so basically, that's talking about one of the Shingens installed the person above him, the shogun. Yeah, that's interesting.
And the shogun nominally was the servant of the emperor.
It's unusual. How does that work? Why is it like that? That seems topsy turvy a little bit.
Well, it goes back to the Japanese conservatism, really, their intense dislike of change. So if you don't like change, but everything has changed, what do? You pretend nothing has changed. The British are good at that.
Well, I see. Okay. All right. Another question. Xenix would like you to talk about the Meiji Restoration.
Well, the Tokugawa shogunate had come into power in the early 1600s. And they cut the country off. They suppressed Catholicism, and they cut Japan off entirely from any contact with the outside world, except the Dutch traders at Nagasaki. The emperor was in seclusion in Kyoto, where he performed basically religious rites and was more of a religious than a political figure. Well, in 1859 or 1857 or 59, one or the other, the U.S. Navy sailed into Tokyo Harbor under Commodore Perry and declared that Japan was now going to open itself to trade with the outside world. And if not, we'd blow them to bits with their little quaint little paper houses and their little pop gun cannon. And because the Japanese were not really keen on being blown to smithereens, they went along with the deal. But before you knew it, they were in the same position China was moving into. The great powers just setting up shop and doing what they wanted. And the Tokugawa shogun seemed completely unable to deal with it. Well, Prince Mutsushito and several other people resolved that when he became emperor, they would put an end to this. And sure enough, in 1867, he became emperor and he took the reign name of Meiji. And he and his cohorts began a war against the Tokugawa and defeated them. And the Tokugawa was the clan, you see, the family.
Yeah.
So as soon as Meiji and his allies succeeded, and they had to fight a couple of civil wars, and there were revolts by different people, but they put them all down, and they immediately began westernizing Japan. They sought to beat the Europeans at their own game by becoming a European power. And part of this was westernizing the monarchy.
What does that mean?
Well, I'll tell you.
Oh, okay.
Where formerly he had been in seclusion in Kyoto, and very few people saw the emperor, he moved into the shogun's old palace in Tokyo, and which is much more centrally located, and for the first several decades of his reign, became very visible. His wives he got rid of, except his favorite. She became his empress. Uh, they opened parliament. They began a parliament, the House of Peers and the House of Deputies. They had a speech from the throne, just like the West, opening bridges, laying plaques, reviewing troops, and of course they had all sorts of Western advisors renewing the Japanese armed forces. And they did a very good job. So before you knew it, the Japanese Army and Navy were forces to be contended with because they wanted to be a Western power. Now, it also meant retooling Shinto. So one thing they did, whereas before, just like in China, Buddhism and Shinto had kind of merged, he separated them. And Shinto became the state church in a very real sense. But they developed a lot of issues, shall we say. And so starting about 1900, they began to revive certain elements of Shinto, and the monarchy once again became sacred. They began re-emphasizing the descent from the Amaterasu. And so Meiji once again went into seclusion. The difference being, though, that he was in Tokyo, not Kyoto. And he reigned until 1912. So by the time he died, he'd been through the Japanese monarchy had been through 3 retoolings under his aegis. The country had defeated Russia in the Russo-Japanese War. They defeated China in 1896 and annexed Taiwan, and they annexed Korea in 1905. So they were very assertive, and they were moving into China the way the Europeans were. There was no solidarity with the Little Yellow Devils. In fact, they took part in the Boxer Rebellion suppression in 1900. They were part of the 8-power alliance with the United States, Russia, Germany, Austria, Japan, Britain, Italy, and Belgium. And those 8 powers landed troops and marched all the way to Peking and destroyed the Boxer Rebellion. So Japan, and then the crowning achievement came when Japan became an equal ally with Britain in 1910. And when the war broke out in 1914, he was dead. His son Yatsuhito became emperor, but he was crazy. So very shortly after that, Hirohito Showa, the emperor in World War II and in my own childhood and youth, he became the regent as early as the 1920s, and he would end up as regent and then as emperor for 60 years. But at any rate, in all of this, the emperor basically, after Meiji died, power really passed to the sort of oligarchy, the zaibatsu, the great business people, great military leaders, and people like that, so that Hirohito did not have the same sort of control that Meiji had had.
That's so interesting. So, so he had a hugely successful rule in a certain sense.
He sure did, and one of the things he did was he enacted what was called the Imperial Rescript on Education, which until 1945 or 45 or 47, every Japanese school child had to recite this like the Pledge of Allegiance every day. And it was signed by Emperor Meiji in 1890, and students had to memorize it. This was the text. Every day, this would have to be recited, and this gives you a feeling for what Meiji was trying to do. Know ye our subjects. Our imperial ancestors have founded our empire on a basis broad and everlasting, and have deeply and firmly implanted virtue. Our subjects, ever united in loyalty and filial piety, have from generation to generation illustrated the beauty thereof. This is the glory of the fundamental character of our empire, and herein lies the source of our education. Ye are subjects. Be filial to your parents, affectionate to your brothers and sisters. As husbands and wives, be harmonious, as friends true. Bear yourselves in modesty and moderation. Extend your benevolence to all. Pursue learning and cultivate arts, and thereby develop intellectual faculties and perfect moral powers. Furthermore, advance public good and promote common interests. Always respect the Constitution and observe the laws. Should emergency arise, offer yourselves courageously to the state, and thus guard and maintain the prosperity of our imperial throne, coeval with heaven and earth. So shall ye not only be our good and faithful subjects, but render illustrious the best traditions of your forefathers. The way here set forth is indeed the teaching bequeathed by our imperial ancestors, to be observed alike by their descendants and the subjects, infallible for all ages and true in all places. It is our wish to lay it to heart in all reverence, in common with you, our subjects, that we may thus attain to the same virtue.
It's interesting.
Well, all that bit about our imperial throne coeval with heaven and earth.
Yeah.
Meaning as long lived as.
Yeah. All right. What about the history of the church in Japan, especially during the westernization of the Meiji period? And what could we do better presently?
Whew. Well, of course, as you know, the Japanese church first opened up in the 1500s. It went underground had no priests or other clergy for 200 years. In 1867, the French missionary Father Petitjean opened up a Catholic church in Nagasaki. And on St. Patrick's Day, was approached by a group of elderly Japanese who asked him, A, if he was married, B, if that statue was the mother of God, and C, if he served the Holy Father in Rome. And he was surprised by these questions, but he answered yes to all of them. And they said, well, we are the Japanese Catholics, and our hearts are the same as yours. And that was on St. Patrick's Day. And so that feast in Japan is not St. Patrick's Day, but the finding of the Japanese Christians. The laws were still on the books against them. So after they revealed themselves, there was a short, sharp period of persecution, which was helped through the arrival of French gunboats, which quieted the desire for smacking them around somewhat. Under Meiji, they were tolerated, and the faith grew. Also, the Orthodox and the Anglicans and the other Protestants came to Japan and set up foundations. But it was difficult. It was difficult because, for one thing, the faith was identified in certain families and groups. And the idea of somebody outside those groups and places becoming Catholic was initially strange. The Jesuits opened up a lot of schools in Japan. They did what they always used to do when they were Catholic, which was make elite schools for the upper classes in hopes of converting some of them and having some success in doing so. The church in World War II, only the Spanish and German missionaries were allowed to stay. The French, the Americans, the British, the Irish, well, the Irish I think you could say, but the others all had to leave, but they stayed. St. Maximilian and Mary Coulombe, of course, before the war, did a lot of great work in Japan, made a lot of converts. And then after Vatican II, the rate of growth slowed down tremendously. But then, because of the population implosion in Japan, the Japanese government began encouraging Japanese Brazilians, descendants of Japanese immigrants to Brazil, to come back to Japan. And they have more than doubled the size of the church in Japan, because a lot of them have converted over that. So that's pretty much where the church in Japan is. St. Francis Xavier believed that the way to convert Japan was to convert China. Certainly it couldn't hurt.